This live presentation was produced in Ashland, Oregon by the Rogue Valley Metaphysical Library and Event Center. RVML relies on the support of our volunteers, members, and donors to organize and present these programs. For more information about this presentation, or to borrow, download, or purchase other recordings from our catalog, please visit our website at rvml.org.
Thank you very much. Is anyone here new to Reiki at all? Or does everybody? Okay, a couple of people. So I'll just very quickly explain a little about what Reiki is before I begin, and before I kind of introduce myself and how I came into Reiki. So Reiki is really the use of universal life energy or divine energy, whatever you would like to call it. And it's the use of that energy. When a Reiki practitioner uses that energy, it flows through their body, through the best analogy I can think of, because it wasn't originally thought of as chakras. The best analogy I can think of is a pipe, is how they used to say. Everybody has an energetic pipe that has become clogged. And when a Reiki practitioner learns Reiki, that pipe becomes unclogged, and the energy can flow very smoothly through them and out of their hands. When a Reiki practitioner puts their hands onto somebody else or themselves, the Reiki flows into the body of that person. And it actually works although it's a spiritual energy, if you like, it works very physically on the body, and it works on the toxins in the body, helping to break down those toxins and for those toxins to be eliminated from the body. Okay. So if you have more questions, the people who didn't know about that later, then please feel free to ask when we have the questions. So to move on to me and how I come to be standing here today, my name is Amanda Jayne, as you know, and I began thinking about learning Reiki quite some time ago when I was involved in the mental health field. And I decided that I would like to learn different ways of helping people with their physical health and mental health, etc. I traveled actually for a while in, I think it was 2000, 99 and 2000. And on my travels, I looked for a Reiki teacher. And I looked in many different countries, in India, Nepal, all over the place. And I found many different teachers, but I just didn't find anybody that I really felt, yes, I would like to learn from you. And in fact, I met somebody in Nepal, in Kathmandu, who took me into a small room when I said I would like to learn Reiki, and told me that he would have to plant a seed in me before I could actually learn Reiki or do it. So as you can imagine, I left the building quite fast. And I decided basically at that point to forget it. You know, obviously it's not a good thing, I'll forget it. And I went back home to England. And a short while later, decided to go to Japan. And I went to Japan to teach English. I was not, at this point, looking for Reiki anymore. I had a really weird, actually, coincidence where I was on the plane going, and I met a German girl in the kind of transfer lounge, and she just approached me. I didn't know her, and she said, "Oh, do you do Reiki?" And I said, "No." And she said, "Oh, you should do it. It's really good." And she disappeared again. I was like, "Oh, is it a sign? I don't know." So anyway, I went to Japan, and as it happened, I was sent to live in a place called Kyoto, which most people have heard of. And I happened to live 10 minutes from the Yamaguchi family. And this lady here, oh, excuse me, I'm treading on my wire. This lady here is Chiyoko Yamaguchi. And she was, I think, about 84 when I met her, 83 in 2002. No, 2001, I'm sorry. So I was introduced to the Yamaguchis through a friend. And I'll just put this back. Hang on. I was introduced to them through a friend, and as soon as I walked into their apartment, Chiyoko Yamaguchi was sitting in the corner in her armchair, and her son was sitting over there. And I knew as soon as I saw her, here's my teacher. This is the woman that I really want to learn with. She was like, I don't know, she was glowing with warmth and love, and she just kind of emanated this energy, you know, which was so kind and so loving and so warm that I was so drawn that I knew immediately, okay, this is it. Here it is. And so I began to learn with them. And I was very, very lucky, I guess, to be in the right place at the right time. For me, I was the only person around at that time who spoke English, and they were trying to begin some seminars in English, and so I was very lucky to be involved in the beginning of that. Here I am today because I stayed there for another 4 years and learned with them, during which time, unfortunately, Chiyoko Yamaguchi passed on. She passed on in 2002. But I continued to learn with her son after that. And I began to assist him in teaching seminars in Europe and Japan when they were in English. And just a couple of years ago, I left Japan, and I am now teaching and giving talks about this incredible family, because it's very fascinating the way that they came to learn Reiki, and obviously about the type of Reiki that they learned and the its origins, I guess, where, you know, how simple it was at the beginning. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the beginning of Reiki now. The Yamaguchi family were lucky enough to learn in the 1920s and 30s. So for those of you who have not heard of Reiki or been involved with Reiki before, I don't know if you can see these pictures very well from there. This gentleman here is Mikao Usui. When I talk about these three people, I would generally say sensei on the end, because sensei means teacher in Japanese, and so that was how they were addressed. So this gentleman, Usui Sensei, was he was unusual for Japanese people. Most Japanese people, especially in those days and still now, stuck to one career. They chose a career and they stick to it. Whereas Usui Sensei was somebody who was very interested in a lot of different things. And so he tried a lot of different careers, if you like. He learned a lot of different things. He studied an awful lot of different things. Now, he spent 3 years in a Zen temple in Kyoto, searching for what we call, I guess, enlightenment. Anjin Ryumei is the Japanese word for it, and it's kind of the state of complete peace of mind. He could not achieve this state, and so went to his Zen master and told him of this. His Zen master suggested that perhaps he experienced death if he really wanted to reach this state. So what Usui Sensei did was he decided to go to a mountain just outside Kyoto, Mount Kurama. It's the most beautiful feeling mountain, it really is. And he went to this mountain and he fasted. He did not fast for a certain number of days. He was actually fasting to die because he was taking his master at his word. However, on the 21st day of his fast, he had a very strange experience in which he is said to have felt like he was struck by lightning. And it's said to have felt like a shock in the center of the brain. Well, when he fell unconscious, and when he awoke from this, he felt refreshed in a way he'd never felt before. And he decided this must be the state of enlightenment that he had been looking for. He was feeling so incredible. So he ran down the mountain, and many of you who've done Reiki will have heard the story where he tripped and ripped off his toenail, and he put his hand on his toenail, as you automatically do, basically, and was surprised to find that the bleeding eased very, very quickly, as did the pain. And the bleeding stopped, and he continued on his way to his Zen master. His Zen master, when he told him of the story, said to him, "You now have this ability, and this energy is clearly a healing energy. Please take it out and help others with it." And so he returned home, and he began treating his family and his neighbors. What happened was, of course, word of mouth spread, because this was very, very effective. And so more and more people began to come to his house, until it's said that the front of the house in Japan, they have like a little lobby, I guess, place. And that's where people put their shoes before they come into the house. And it was said to have always been filled with shoes in his house because so many people came. So this became extremely popular. And I won't go into great detail about it, but he found a way of opening, if you like, this ability in others. Everybody already has this ability. He found the way of opening this pipe, if you like. Now, he didn't find that through visions or dreams or anything like that. He found that through his studies. Remember, as I said, he'd studied an awful lot of different things. And he began to teach people how to do Reiki, how to use Reiki. Reiki is something that is not new, of course. People have been hand healing for thousands of years. And in Japan especially, many people used hand healing, especially in the Shinto faith, which is the Japanese indigenous kind of religion. So it was not new, but the way that he was doing it, and this ability to pass it to other people. And when I say pass, I don't mean he was giving anyone anything. Again, I reiterate, it just means that he was kind of opening people's ability to do it. So this was something new. Therefore, he called it Usui Reiki. The actual name he called it was Shin kaizen Usui Reiki Ryoho, which means Usui Reiki treatment method for the improvement of your body and mind. He taught 20 teachers. First, he taught people how to use this ability for themselves. Often people would come to him for help, and he would help them to get better, and they would then learn how to do this for themselves so that they could then repay the kindness by going out and healing, and not only continuing to heal themselves, but healing other people as well. So he taught many people how to do that. And then he began to teach teachers so that Reiki could begin to spread, basically, to many, many people. I have some pictures here which you can feel free to come up and see afterwards. The top picture here is Usui Sensei is in the middle, just there, okay? And these are his teachers of teachers, okay? And there are 20 of them in this picture. There were only 20 teachers of teachers. And we know that for several reasons. One, in Japan, when you have a group photo, if anyone is missing from that group photo, you kind of put them in the side afterwards. You kind of post it in there. So these are his 20 teachers of teachers. This was taken 16th January 1926. And Usui Sensei died a couple of months later. So it's extremely unlikely that anybody new joined this group in between this time. So, after Usui Sensei's death, these teachers continued to pass Reiki on. Now, an interesting fact is that in Japan, before the Second World War began in Japan, there were over 1 million practitioners practicing Reiki in Japan, which is huge. It's a huge number of people. And the reason that it was so huge and so popular was because it was accepted and used by the Japanese Navy. And the reason the Japanese Navy kind of adopted Reiki was because at least 4 of the people in this picture were naval officers. Okay, so they were really quite high-ranking. They were vice admirals, rear admirals, and Hayashi, Chujiro Hayashi, most people have heard of. Chujiro Hayashi is the man in the middle of these 3 people. He was a naval officer and a medical officer in the Navy. So what happened was Usui Sensei, before he died, had begun a group, a Reiki group, if you like, called the Ryoho Gakkai. Okay, this is a group of people. He also had said to Chujiro Hayashi, who was a medical doctor, please go out and begin a clinic. He had a clinic in Tokyo. The reason that he asked this man to begin a clinic was because it still wasn't legal to have a clinic using hand energy healing in Japan at that time. But Chujiro Hayashi was a doctor, therefore it was okay for him to have a clinic because he was a doctor. And so Usui Sensei sent him kind of out to go and use Reiki in a clinic, and he actually said to further develop it as a medical practice. And that's what Chujiro Hayashi did. Now, to move back to the story about the Japanese Navy, what happened there was the next president of the Gakkai, remember that group I told you about, the president following Usui Sensei after his death was a high-ranking officer. And as I said, he continued, and along with all the others, to spread Reiki. The Japanese Navy used Reiki on their ships because they didn't need supplies, so many supplies, they could just use their hands. And there were even Reiki stations in several ports around Japan where people, the Navy people could get Reiki. So, as I said, it was huge. It was really huge. However, once Japan lost in the war and the Americans came to govern in Japan, a lot of the systems were changed in Japan. And for example, I think religion was liberalized, education was changed, and also the medical system was changed. And what happened was the Eastern practices that were practiced in Japan were outlawed, and conventional Western medicine was brought into Japan, or was considered to be the only thing that should be used. However, acupuncturists were huge as a big group, and they were able to successfully lobby the government, and they were actually given their license back so that acupuncture was allowed along with what we call conventional Western medicine again. However, as you can imagine, the Japanese Navy were using Reiki. There's no way it's now going to be allowed because it's associated with the military. So what happened was the Gakkai, that group that Usui Sensei formed, became a closed group. And they agreed not to practice Reiki outside of this closed group. They didn't teach, they didn't practice with people outside of the group, and they kind of went underground, if you like, because it wasn't legal. Now, there were other hand healing groups around at the time, and some of them became religious because religion had been liberalized. So some of them became religious, and provided they didn't touch the body, they were allowed to continue as religions. But Reiki remained with the Gakkai. However, Chujiro Hayashi, this gentleman here, we'll call him Hayashi Sensei, he continued with his clinic. And he continued to teach Reiki in the same way that Usui Sensei had taught. He tried to kind of model himself on Usui Sensei, and he tried to go out to different places to teach people about this wonderful healing method. Now, Chiyoko Yamaguchi is the lady that I met in 2001. She and her family became associated with Reiki through her uncle. Now, her family history is very complicated, and if you're interested in it, you can actually, there's a lot more about it in the book Light on the Origins of Reiki here. But to try to give you a kind of synopsis of it, she was born to quite a big family, and she was adopted by her uncle. Her uncle's name was Wasaburo Sugano. She was adopted by him, and he was quite rich. And he was a businessman in Osaka, which is one of the kind of main business districts in Japan. Excuse me. So she was adopted by him for a short time, and then she was adopted by another uncle in her family. She was kind of moved around. I'm so sorry, I say adopted, but it's fostered, not adopted. So she was then fostered out to her other uncle who lived in the countryside quite far away. But she remained very, very close to the Suganos living in Osaka. Wasaburo Sugano was, as I say, a very successful businessman. However, he had 2 children, and both children died. One of them died soon after she was born, and the other died at age 15 from tuberculosis. And he had tried to do everything he could to save this child because they had a lot of money, so they'd got lots of different doctors. They tried everything. He couldn't be saved. And that kind of sparked an interest for Wasaburo Sugano in other types of medicine. He came across Chujiro Hayashi here, and he began to learn Reiki with him, and immediately became really impressed with the efficacy of this energy healing. So, excuse me, he wanted his family, and the rest of his family were actually in the countryside back in Ishikawa, which was quite far away in those days. He wanted them to be able to learn and benefit from this, especially his mother. And so he actually called Chiyoko Sensei's sister to come and learn in Osaka, which in those days was a long way and very expensive to travel to, so that she could then take Reiki back to Ishikawa and treat people there. And so over this few years, several people from Ishikawa learned how to do Reiki and began treating people. And the people in Ishikawa, her family and the neighbors, of course, became really, really impressed with how wonderful this energy was. So they invited Hayashi Sensei to go to the countryside, to Ishikawa, and teach. And that's what he did. He said as long as there were 10 participants, he'd do that. Excuse my lead. I keep getting caught in my lead. So this picture here is his first seminar in Ishikawa. You can see Chujiro Hayashi is in the center here. This is Chiyoko Sensei's sister. That was her repeat seminar, and I think she took the second level here. And all these people attended the seminar. You can see there's a woman in the bushes, and she, of course, was absent for the photograph, but they stuck her in. There's a fair amount of women here too, you can see in this seminar. And Reiki was really very much valued by midwives to use with babies and young and pregnant mothers. And it was also valued by women and mothers to use with their children and with their families. It was considered a wonderful, wonderful gift to bring your family Reiki and be able to use that with your children and your husband. And so this is 1935 here. And here in 1938, there's another picture because this was Chiyoko sensei, Chiyoko Yamaguchi's first seminar. Her uncle had told her that although she was very, very keen, she wasn't allowed to learn until she finished high school, I think it was. She was 17. And so she's at the back here, dressed in her kimono. They used to dress up very formally for the seminars in those days. And we have Chujiro Hayashi here again. So anybody who's interested to look more, please, come up and see these photos. So now Chiyoko sensei, her sister, her aunt and uncle, and other members of the family are all practicing Reiki. Wasuburo Sugano, the gentleman who lost his 2 children, his wife also contracted TB. However, luckily they had already learned Reiki, and so she received daily treatments for the TB from usually more than one person, and she recovered completely. Chiyoko Yamaguchi's brother also had TB and received treatments very, very regularly and made a full recovery as well. So you can see that in these days, Reiki was actually being used to treat very serious illnesses that were actually lethal in those days. It was being used to treat the serious illnesses, but it was also being used for basically everything. Now, Chiyoko sensei and her sisters became very, very valued in their village and in their society, if you like. People would call on them whenever there was a problem, and they would go and help people using Reiki. They would treat more serious problems, had to be treated very, very regularly. It's not like a once a week thing. If somebody has a serious problem, they would treat them daily for at least 1 hour, usually more. And as I said, they would often use group treatments, so often more than one person would be treating somebody. They also used it a lot for first aid. And from my own experience too, it's incredible used for first aid, really incredible. Chiyoko sensei kind of became like this burns specialist, if you like, in the village, because a lot of the local children would burn themselves, either in the hearth fires. They're not hearth fires. I don't know quite what to call them. In Japan, they used to have fires in the middle of the room where they would cook. They had a big kind of pot over it, and those fires would often be going in the middle of the room. Usually, because it was countryside, there would be paddy fields all around, and the parents often had to go and work in the fields, and the young children would stay in the house. And sometimes there would be injuries where the children had put their arms in the fire or something like that. They often also had injuries with the metal, I want to call them bed pans. They're not bed pans. What are they? Hot water bottles, that's it. The metal hot water bottles that they put, you could get a serious burn from them. So she often treated people in this way. Excuse me. She also brought up her 4 boys using only Reiki, nothing else. So she didn't have them vaccinated, and she didn't take them to the doctors when they had cuts, scrapes, bruises, illnesses, things like tonsillitis and ear infections. She would treat them all with Reiki very, very successfully. And her boys grew up to be very strong and healthy, despite the fact that Tadao Yamaguchi, who's the author of this book, was a very, very sickly young child. But she would give him Reiki regularly. He got more than the other boys. And he claims that's why he's so enthusiastic about Reiki, because he got Reiki from his mother a lot more than his brothers. So she would basically, if they had a cold or something like that, she would basically sleep with them and give them Reiki all night until they got better. It was really, part of her job as a mother, she felt, to be giving this Reiki. She treated many, many people, and became, as I say, in her village, very, very popular. She did actually go to Manchuria during the war with her husband, and came back after the war on a terrible, terrible boat trip, so she describes, where conditions were awful and people were kind of sick all over the place. And she says that the fact that she had Reiki helped her to help her and her children survive that, because people were dying around them at that kind of time. So her family continued to practice Reiki like for 65 odd years. And it was in the 1990s that suddenly they discovered that other people in the world were doing Reiki. They didn't actually know until that time that anyone else was doing it. Tadao Sensei, Chiyoko Sensei's son, who I talked about, he's written the book, he kind of grew up thinking that Reiki was all there was. He didn't know that you took medicines and stuff like that. And he describes how he learnt not to talk about Reiki at school very quickly, because when he mentioned Reiki to his classmates or to the teachers, they kind of ridiculed him basically and laughed at him. And so he learned not to talk about it, but they just used it in the home, and as I say, with family, friends, anybody, word of mouth would come. So it was only later on in the 1990s that he met somebody who said they did Reiki. And he was very surprised because he hadn't met anyone else who did Reiki. And this person who was talking to him gave him a little name card, but the name card had a kind of, the word Reiki was written in borrowed words, so it looked like it came from another country, not from Japan. So he decided to kind of explore it, and anyway discovered that the roots of the Reiki that this gentleman had learned were the same as his mother's roots back here, coming back to Chujiro Hayashi and Usui Sensei. People began to find out about Chiyoko Sensei after that, and Westerners started to come and visit her, as well as Japanese Reiki teachers. And very quickly, Chiyoko Yamaguchi learned just how far Reiki had spread in America, Europe, all over the world, basically. So she was very happy to hear that Reiki was being used by all these different people. However, a lot of people, when they came over, had were describing to her different things than she had learned. So what they were describing to her was either a variation of what she had learned sometimes, or it wasn't in the seminars that she had learned. And also some of the things that she had learned were really the most important parts of Reiki people didn't know about. And so people began to ask her, please teach us what you learned. And at first she didn't really want to do that. She'd been teaching people, but she would generally heal people and then teach them, and they would continue on their way, continue to heal themselves. She wasn't sure about teaching people, and especially teaching people from other countries, because she really wasn't sure whether they would understand everything. There's an awful lot of Japanese culture embedded in the kind of depths and the philosophy behind Reiki, and she wasn't sure whether it could be translated, basically. However, people kept coming, and she kept seeing more and more evidence of these differences, and decided that yes, they would teach seminars. And so they began collecting material from the family. They collected a wonderful scroll. It's a beautiful Japanese scroll that Hayashi Sensei wrote, that one of their family members had. And that's now used in the seminars, which is wonderful. And they collected a lot of photos, not just these ones. They have other photos of the family and stuff like that, which they now use in the seminars.
Did it become legal at some point like that?
Sorry?
Did it become legal again at some point like
In Japan? No. So when I learnt in 2001, people still, most people didn't know about it. The people I was telling about it in Japan were freaked out that I was like, when I told them what I was learning, they were really like, be careful, because I told some of my students about it, but they were like, please be careful, it's a cult, like, you know, and there's very much a feeling of fear in Japan. There has been over cults, you know, since they've had some problems with that. And so they have to be very careful. However, over the last few years since then, between then and now, Reiki has really become a lot more prolific again in Japan. And possibly due to Tadao Sensei and Chiyoko Yamaguchi published a book in Japan so that people could see, okay, this is something that's actually quite practical and it's not scary and it's not religious and this kind of thing. And so more and more people are now accepting it again. I believe, but I can't be sure. I believe it's still not actually literally legal though, to use it. So, but more people now, even like doctors in Japan and nurses are starting now to come and learn more about it, which is wonderful. Yeah. Where was I? Yeah, so just to tell you a little bit more about some of those differences that Chiyoko Yamaguchi found were existing. Now, of course, there's many different kinds of Reiki now available in the West. And each one teaches slightly different things because many people have added wonderful things onto the Reiki and they use it in that way. However, originally, it was very simple. It was so simple, you know. And I guess the most important thing in Reiki that Chiyoko Sensei used to stress was something called Byosen. B-Y-O-S-E-N. And Byosen is basically an accumulation of toxins held in the body. And in the seminars, they teach about how and where they collect and all of this kind of thing. But Byosen is basically how you treat using Reiki. There are no hand positions there were no hand positions in those days at all. What they did was they treated the head, which is very, very important and always has toxins in everyone. And then they would follow Byosen. And that means that they would look for places in the body that had the most toxins. And the feelings in their hands told them, or tells you even now, where those toxins are located in the body. And that tells you the severity of the Byosen, which is what you can gauge with your hands, tells you how long to stay in one place. So that, for example, if I'm treating somebody who has a kidney disease and they will have, of course, extremely bad Byosen, a lot of Byosen around the kidney area. Chiyoko Sensei, when she treated people for something like that, would spend 1.5 or 2 hours only on the kidneys. That's it, the whole time. And in fact, she would do that for a number of months before she started treating other parts of the body. Yeah, and has successfully, somebody who was about to receive dialysis came to her, and they managed to successfully increase the kidney function so that she doesn't now need it. But that takes months of sitting in the same place. And she could tell how long to stay there, when to move, by the sensation in her hands, basically. So Chiyoko Sensei was confused because she didn't understand how a treatment could be a treatment if you didn't know about Byosen and where to put your hands, because that was how they had learnt back then. The symbols that they had in Reiki, originally, there were so few, very, very, very few. And the symbols that she learnt and taught were sometimes vastly different and sometimes just slightly different from the ones that people had told her about. And so there were differences in that. But she stressed that the main difference is that it's very important to know the meaning behind the symbol. Why Usui Sensei chose this symbol? What is the meaning? What is the background of it? What is the intention in this symbol? That was very important. And that was something that people that came to her didn't know about. They didn't know what the symbol was or why it was. Yeah. So that was another big difference according to her. The psychological healing that is done very, very differently also. It's I can't say a lot about it, really, because you really need to learn about it. But again, there's a very specific meaning behind it and behind the symbol that's used that is very important. And I find it to be incredibly powerful, the psychological healing. And people I've taught and people I've seen taught in Tadao Sensei's seminars also have said, wow, this is really quite powerful. In Chiyoko Sensei's days, they actually often used to use it for bedwetting. So they would use it to help children with bedwetting, and very successfully. That was supposed to be another one of her specialities that she used to get called on for. So let me just check. Yeah, there was also a massage, something called a ketsueki kokan massage, which has now actually been published in this book here. There is unfortunately a mistake in it, but it has been published in this book. And that was something that was used after a treatment, and was also considered to be a very, very important part of a treatment. There's other things, for example, the Gokai. Gokai in Japanese means 5 principles. And excuse me, the 5 principles, when they were translated, in many people who came to see her were telling her a different translation than was the original simplicity. Something had been added. Not something bad, of course, it was a wonderful thing, but it wasn't the original translation. The Gokai were also considered to be a very, very fundamental, integral part of Reiki. And what Chiyoko Sensei felt was that they'd kind of been pushed a little bit to one side as a kind of side note, or by the way, some people were not understanding how important they were. And originally, Usui Sensei devised the Gokai for a very good reason. What happened was he was having people come to him for treatment, and they were going away cured and happy. And then some of them were coming back to him again with either the same or a different problem. And so he began to see the importance and the connection between the mind-body, between somebody's attitude and their health. And to try and help people to understand this, and to try and help people in their own spiritual development and their own personal development, he developed these 5 principles. The 5 principles, very quickly, are, the first one is just for today, but that runs through all 5. It's not actually one of the principles. And the just for today is, of course, about living in the now. The first principle, I've forgotten the first principle. So, so Kyodake wa means just for today. Ikaruna is do not be angry. Now it's translated as do not be angry, which can be difficult for us in our Western way that we talk about. You cannot say do not and this kind of thing. That's the translation of it. The meaning of it is about learning to release your anger, to not hold on to your anger, because holding on to your anger, it stays in your body and it starts to create health problems. Shimpai suna is the second one. Shimpai suna is do not worry. Yeah, stop it. So it sounds easy, and obviously it doesn't just work just to say do not worry, but these were his guides. Try and live by these every day, he was telling people. Try and aim towards these. And of course, worrying helps nobody and has a huge effect on your health. Kanshashite was the next one. Kanshashite means to be grateful. So obviously a state of gratitude is incredible. It's huge. It's huge. It's really fundamental to health and joy and happiness. Gyo hageme is translated as "do your duties," okay? Which I guess is probably where the people changed it a little bit, because it sounds kind of odd, "do your duties." The meaning that he had behind this was really twofold, I guess. It's about doing your service in the world. It's about doing what you have to do right in front of you, what's here now. It's about, it's about your personal development, your duty to yourself, your service to yourself, as well as your service to the world. And finally, hito ni shinsetsu ni, which means be kind to others. And his idea was kindness spreads. If I'm kind to somebody else, even if they are not accepting of that, it comes back to me and it spreads. Being kind to others was Usui Sensei's idea of the most important thing. And he believed that giving Reiki to others was one way of being kind. Chiyoko Sensei, who to me really was the embodiment of the 5 principles. You know, when I met her and you know, she was incredible. She lived these principles and believed in them. She recited them in the morning and the evening. And she said that basically if you pay attention to the first 4, do not be angry, do not worry, be grateful, and do your service to yourself and the world, the 5th one came automatically. Once you're in that state, of course, kindness flows from you. So there's a lot of wisdom, I feel. There's a depth and a lot of wisdom in the Gokai. And as I say, the idea was to help people help themselves and their own attitude and therefore their own health as well. And so that was something that she wanted people to know was very important. Yeah. Let me just check. I think I'll just give you a couple of examples of treatments that Chiyoko Sensei talked about, just to give you a kind of idea of some of the amazing things that happened. There was one particular time that her sister-in-law, I believe it was, her sister-in-law got coal dust in her right eye, and it kind of scratched the eye inside, and it became infected basically, and the eye started to fester. It's horrible, isn't it? And she and Chiyoko Sensei and her husband rushed basically to the hospital because the doctor wanted to remove the eye before it spread to the other eye. Excuse me. So Chiyoko Sensei and her husband gave her sister-in-law Reiki at the hospital for 2 hours straight. And after 2 hours, the doctor came and had a look, give you another 2 hours, because he wanted to operate immediately. So they were having to really persuade him to let them do this Reiki. So he gave them another 2 hours. They gave her treatment again for a further 2 hours. And after that, the doctor returned, looked at the eye and said, okay, if you continue to give her Reiki, then we won't do the operation. And they did continue to give her Reiki, and the eye was saved, and the infection cleared up completely. So they've managed to save her eye, which was wonderful. Yeah. So she has many, many stories like this. There's another of a young boy in the village who had burnt his hand, and his fingers was kind of melted, stuck like this, melted basically in this. And it was 3 days before his parents came to find the Yamaguchi family and ask them for help. And this little boy had not slept. He had just been crying the whole time. And the parents weren't sure about Reiki, but they'd heard about how good it had been for people. And so I believe it was actually 3 members of the family that worked on him. And they worked on his arm, and he fell asleep within 20 to 30 minutes. And because that had been the first time he'd slept, his parents started to think, okay, maybe maybe there's something going on with this Reiki. And so they continued to treat him. And after 3 days, it stopped weeping. It had been festering. Apparently it stank. And after 3 days, it had stopped weeping. They continued to give him Reiki. And very shortly afterwards, the skin kind of peeled off like a snake skin. And his hand underneath was okay. It opened up like this. And obviously it was a different color to start with because it was new skin. But it over a period of months, it kind of developed back into looking completely normal. There was another boy in the village who'd had actually the same thing happen, and he had gone to hospital. And in those days, the way that the doctors treated it was simply by bandaging it. And what had happened, this poor little boy, his fingers had actually fused in, and he had to have the tops of his fingers amputated. So for Chiyoko Sensei and her family, this showed them again that Reiki was worth doing and that the results of it actually seemed to be much better than in those days the results they were having in the hospitals. Yeah. They treated somebody for, I think it was a cousin of hers, for hepatitis, and the doctor hadn't been able to get she had to have an injection into her artery, I believe. And the doctor couldn't find the artery and they couldn't do it. So she decided to just use, yeah, I know it's painful, isn't it? She decided to just use Reiki instead. And she came to stay at the house. I think she went to stay at the house in Osaka. And she received Reiki daily and recovered too. When she went back to the doctor, he said, okay, you don't need the injections anymore. Cancer is something they have treated as well. And Chiyoko Sensei and Tadao Sensei would never ever say we can cure cancer. No, not at all. But in the if somebody came to them in the early stages of cancer, they had a lot of success in treating people, provided they treated them daily, or at least 5 days a week was generally what happened. In the later stages of somebody's life, if they are very, very sick and clearly do not have long left, then they also treated people with Reiki because, excuse me, it tended to be so comforting to them in the later stages of their lives. It would help them with pain and help them with other symptoms. If somebody's receiving chemotherapy, it can help with the symptoms greatly too, side effects of that too. But more than anything, what tends to happen is the person tends to become less afraid, and it's easier for them to let go very peacefully, which is a wonderful thing to be part of. And I myself now am working in an AIDS clinic, and so I've also had experience of working with people at the end of their life, and I have to say it's been incredibly rewarding for me to be part of that, and I have actually learned a lot. And I guess this is the idea again of the Hitoni Shinsetsuni, the kindness coming back to you, you know, and I guess most people know as you put out, it comes back. And so it's been a rewarding, incredible experience for me. I've also worked with people in Bosnia. I worked with the people who had been in concentration camps, women from concentration camps, and guys who'd been in the war, and I was, I guess, surprised at the effects it had, the incredible effects it had. I was only there for 2 weeks, and I had incredible experiences, saw incredible things happen, and again, the rewards for me were huge, huge, huge. So, basically, Jikiden Reiki is what Chiyoko Yamaguchi and her son Tadao decided to call their seminars. They call it Jikiden because Jikiden means directly passed down. So that's the kind of meaning of Jikiden. And so they now Tadao Sensei continues to teach in Japan, and he sometimes goes to other countries. And I am also teaching now as well, exactly as Chiyoko Sensei taught and Tadao Sensei teach. And the idea behind Jikiden Reiki, Tadao Sensei and Chiyoko Sensei decided that they wanted to help bring Reiki into for example, hospitals and into medical professions in a way that it became accepted. It's incredible used in conjunction as well with conventional medicine. I would never say, get rid of conventional medicine, use Reiki. No, but it's absolutely incredible, especially used like after an operation that is very necessary. The healing time is so fast. It's actually incredible. They also wanted it to be introduced to other, what they call alternative health practitioners, reflexologists, aromatherapists, massage therapists, because Reiki can be used with anything, and it enhances anything, because as you're doing whatever practice you're doing, the Reiki is coming out of your hands, and so it's a wonderful thing to use with anything. They would like to see it begin to be used in the household as a medicine in the household, if you like, because it's so impressive used with the everyday ailments that children have, with your toothache and your earache and your colds and flu. It's incredible, and as first aid too. And they would love to see it now being brought into the household and being used and seen as normal to be used in that way, thereby also helping the incredible amount of global waste to decrease that we currently have by our use of pills and all sorts of other things. So those are really their aims in bringing Jikiden Reiki back. I am going to finish talking there, basically. But if anybody has any questions, I believe we have a 10-minute break now. Yeah. And if anybody has any questions, if you could just hold them in your head or write them down so that you can remember. And I'm really very, very happy to answer them after the break. Okay. I would just also like to let you know that I have a mailing list here. So if you're interested in, being on my mailing list, I send newsletters out once every 1 or 2 months. You wouldn't be inundated. And you can receive, actually, if you would like, a copy of my interpretation of the Gokai. Remember the 5 principles we talked about? I've written an article on that, which you can receive if you would like to. And information on any seminars or anything you would like to know, or if you'd just like to be in contact for questions, because I know a lot of you already teach Reiki. Okay, so I'll pass this around. Anybody can put down. And there's a little bit of information here. I'm not sure there's enough to go around, but if you're interested, please take one of these. Thank you. I will actually be teaching a seminar here in a couple of weekends. If anybody's interested, please come and see me. Okay. So let's have tea. Very important. Yes.
I know you live in Portland, but is there like a local Reiki group down here?
Well, I believe some of the people in this room practice Reiki, probably down here. So does anyone have anything they wanted to say about that?
Yes. We have been teaching online classes the last about 5 years now.
Oh,
I can talk to you after.
okay.
And I'm down in Grass Pass.
Oh,
That's there too.
Okay, anyone else? Yeah?
You read the 5 principles. I have 6.
Yeah, what it is. The first one, the just for today, is not one of the principles. Just for today is a, I'm not sure what to call it, but it's it's something that covers all 5. Just for today, do not be angry. Just for today, do not worry. Just for today. Okay. Anything else?
I've only taken like Reiki 1, but I also took Quantum Touch before that.
Right.
And then I started to practice it. And in the practicing of it outside of my family, it was not like appointment stuff. I would approach somebody that, indicated they might be able to do it almost to the person I don't know if I helped him. I didn't know if that was important, whether I helped him or not. But it became rather scary that I'd be chasing life if we continued with that. So I sort of pulled back from it. And then I just sort of developed sort of my own mishmash of it. And you see, my family, I did that thing with my mother passing away. She decided she didn't want to live anymore, but she kind of didn't know how to die, and so she was really struggling.
Mm.
And the biggest problem my brother and I had was finding a medication that would allow her to sleep. But then when she'd sleep, she'd be in trouble with what was going on.
Right.
And we finally found something that sort of knocked her out good. And that following night, I did Reiki treatment on her as she was out. And I kind of went with her higher self, my higher self, and let me guide it through. But I did a Reiki treatment over as much of her body as I could access easily. And then I went home and they called me the next morning and said she passed away.
Right.
Again, that's kind of frightening to know that you can relax somebody into death.
Yeah. I can understand that you would.
I mean, it was a relief for me immediately that she was no longer suffering.
Yeah.
But it's still one of those things that makes me want to watch that.
Yeah. Reiki cannot make anything happen that the person does not want at some level. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
So you can never give too much Reiki. You can never, some people have asked questions about worrying about karma and things like that. You don't change things. You help the person to change themselves in a way that they want to change themselves, if you see what I mean. Now, with your mum's death, she was passing away, clearly, as you said.
Right.
And my experience and from what I've learned would tell me that the Reiki that you gave her may well have helped her move into a place where she was able to relax and go. That does not mean that somebody who was not at that stage of their life would relax into death. I'm not sure if you were saying that was a worry or not. No, there's no way you could relax someone enough that they would. Because I guess I understand the question because it's supposed to be very nice over there, But you wouldn't. You wouldn't relax someone into that, no. It's very relaxing to receive it, but also it can be very painful to receive it. If you're giving a treatment, that's Kim's testament because I did it on my friend here, and it was very painful. If you are giving a Reiki treatment to somebody who has a serious condition, and remember we talked about the byosen, the toxins, there are a lot of toxins there, the Reiki is going to bring those toxins up and out. And so therefore, whilst it's bringing more of them up to get them out, it can be very uncomfortable. And so it's not always completely relaxing. But it is once a person gets to a stage where their body is healthier and the huge number of toxins have gone. Everybody has a certain amount. The lady, I'll use the same example, the lady with the kidney problem, when Chiyoko sensei put her hands on her, the lady was in so much pain she would cry sometimes because the Reiki is stirring things around. It's the toxins become like this tight mass, this tight ball. Everybody knows what it's like when you have stiff shoulders and you get a ball, everything stiffens up. You've got a really big mass of like toxins. And so as the Reiki goes in and begins to melt that and disperse those toxins, then everything starts to move around and it hurts. It doesn't have to hurt. It can, in extreme situations, hurt a little bit. And so Chiyoko sensei would very kindly persuade this lady to please continue, it's okay, it's going to get better. And after a number of weeks, the pain started to get better when she did it. I feel like I've answered your question in several different ways. So let me just recap. I guess to say with your mum, you did not make anything happen that was not meant to happen, if you see what I mean. You will have eased it for her very, very much, would be my opinion on that. If you do it on anyone else, I don't know what is happening with you if it's true that people are disappearing after you've given them something. Certainly it's nothing to do with the Reiki, if you see what I mean. The Reiki energy does not do that. It will simply help people to, the fundamental idea of Reiki, which is something I love, the fundamental idea that Usui Sensei had about Reiki was allowing people, and he stressed self-healing as well, allowing people to peel off the layers in their life, physical and psychological, that allow the true self to come through, the true self to appear as we are meant to be. So we're helping ourselves peel off layers. It can help people in their personal development, spiritual development, physical development. It helps people in whichever way is perfect for them at that time. So then you may have something else going on there. Yeah.
One packed up and went to Brazil.
Well, it can actually help people to become clear about things sometimes. So it may be that you've been helping people make decisions that they've been wanting to make. It's possible.
Yeah. And that thing with when something is severely painful, in the one like quantum touch, it tells you to sort of ask if you want to stop. But it sounds like in Reiki,
Yeah.
because you have built up the collection of toxins, you wouldn't necessarily say, okay, we'll stop.
Well, you would encourage them to continue because it's helping them. That the pain is telling us it's working. The pain is telling us it's moving stuff around in there. If somebody said, please stop, of course you would stop. You wouldn't ever do anything against anyone's will. But she would talk to her calmly and explain this is helping. And so the lady would continue. And wonderfully, now here she is 3 years later, not on dialysis. Yeah.
I have heard two different schools of thought in treating cancer.
Uh-huh.
I've heard, yes, Reiki's great for people who have cancer, which you briefly touched on.
Mm-hmm.
And then I've also heard, no, don't give Reiki to people who have cancer because you'll cause it to spread. Curious what your thoughts are, or what you have to share about that.
I would go with the first one. That's it, really. I would go with that. And
Any
from
idea where number two came from?
Yeah, I
And I mean,
Okay.
I've had, there are a lot of people I know who have had some very serious health issues. And they've said, don't send me Reiki. I don't want Reiki. It's going to cause the pain. It's going to cause all these other things and cause my condition to really spread and flare up.
It's such a shame that is, for me anyway, it's such a shame that is the way that it's being seen now. And I know there's other contraindications that people have come up with, and they just didn't exist to begin with. And Chiyoko Sensei and her whole family had 65 years experience of treating people. So it's not like a few case studies, and they never had any problems. So that would be my answer. Yeah.
I'm a massage therapist, and in massage, it's contraindicated for cancer.
Right.
And I'm wondering if somebody didn't somehow get that and mix it into
Yeah,
Reiki
it's quite
somehow,
possible.
because I'm with you. Reiki is wonderful, and I can't see any situation that it wouldn't be good for.
No. If the thing is, if it is too painful for somebody,
Right.
if you have your hand there, then you can move your hand either side of that area, and sometimes that will lessen the pain for them. And it's not as good as being directly on it, but it still is very, very good. Yeah.
So do you think that there is a difference in delivering the energy, whether you're actually physically touching the individual as opposed to being like, 6 inches or a foot away?
Well-
And part B of that is,
Uh-huh.
what about animals?
Well-
Because many animals, they're not gonna let you touch them,
Yeah. So, addressing the first part of your question about the
The hands.
the hands. Chiyoko Sensei always put her hands on people because that was how Hayashi Sensei taught her and Usui Sensei taught him, hands on. In fact, Chiyoko Sensei liked to go under the clothes as well, but it's not necessary. You can do it from above too. They don't say it doesn't work if you do it from above. Of course it does. There's no kind of magic, oh, now it doesn't work thing going on. But it's you can feel more easily the byosen when you're on. You can actually feel for it, but it's once you've found the area, once you've felt above for the area, you put your hand down, then you can feel there's actually a pattern of byosen that goes up and down, and you can feel that very well when your hand is on. So it's not necessary to bring your hand off. I know some schools teach Reiki with hands off, actually, so I've heard. And Chiyoko Sensei basically said that it can make your arm very tired. So it's more difficult to do Reiki for a long time if your hand is hovering above. So she stressed, we want to do Reiki for as long as possible. Let's make ourselves comfortable while we're doing it, So, and sorry, you had another part to that, didn't you? Animals.
Well, I was just wondering about pets, if they had ever talked about pets, or if they ever treated pets?
You know what? They never treated pets in those days.
Okay.
They never treated them in those days. However, it's really effective, as I'm sure you know.
Yes.
It's very, very effective for pets. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. So I think you've had your hand up for a while, then I'll go there and then.
Yeah, I was just going back to the conversation before and contraindications. Is it possible that someone could be doing it improperly?
Well, improperly, it depends on the person's intention, I guess. Reiki cannot, if you're doing Reiki, you cannot do it improperly, if you see what I mean. The very fact that you are using Reiki and the Reiki energy means that only Reiki energy is coming through you. I have the intention to do Reiki. Reiki energy is coming through me. It's very pure. What do I want to say? Having an attitude of gratitude whilst you're doing Reiki is the best thing you can do, Chiyoko Sensei says. It's not about what you're thinking particularly or anything else like that. It's an attitude of thank you, this is not me doing it, thank you for this. Yeah, sorry, go on.
I just wanted to add a comment to that, because I used to live in Michigan, and we had a group of us that did volunteer both Reiki and healing touch work, and it was for cancer patients, and it was part of the oncology clinic at the hospital, and we would do it once a week in the evening, so patients would come voluntarily and receive it, and we never ever, in my experience, ever had anybody that had a negative experience from it. It was always just very relaxing and calming and very healing for them. So I'm not sure where it came from, maybe fear from somebody. And so
Yeah.
that's been my experience.
Thank you. And somebody had a question there.
My question is, can you speak about attunements? What you've learned about them and what you've heard about them and the variations and that whole process?
No, it's the answer. Short answer. I guess if you have a specific question about it, maybe I might be able to do a bit more. But basically, the attunement process in those days was considered to be a kind of sacred ritual. The way to do it was passed on teacher to student. Personally, in those days, they didn't actually have seminars in those days for teachers. Now we have kind of levels, don't we? In those days, they had the levels that you learn how to do Reiki, and then you were watched by your teachers, and once you'd had enough experience and your teachers felt you were ready, they would say, okay, now I'm going to teach you the attunements. And that was how it was done, basically. So it was done as a very sacred ritual in the pitch black. Pitch black. Yeah, Chiyoko Sensei, there's a video actually that now available that she is her talking about the attunement, her first attunement process. It's also in that book if you're interested. You know, it might be worth getting that book from Amazon, The Light on the Origins. But she just, it's so sweet because in the video she talks about how dark it was. And when the video was translated, I kind of helped with some of the wording, and we had to find lots of different ways for saying dark, because she said many times it was dark, it was so dark, it was really dark, it was pitch black. So it was clearly very, very dark in the room.
So 17 different words.
Yeah. So I can tell you that much, and I can tell you it's very simple.
So the teacher, based on the ability of the students and what they saw progressing and emerging from the students, would be taught the attunement process.
Mm-hmm.
But would they be given the attunements as a part of the seminar?
Yeah, they would be given an attunement and taught the attunements.
Okay.
Taught how to do them. Yeah.
Okay, but they would be given the attunement, but not necessarily taught how to do them until later.
Do you mean in the first levels?
Correct.
Yeah, in the first levels, should they received attunements?
Okay. So
Yeah.
is that really the creation of the pipe, so to speak, or the opening of the pipe?
Not the creation of the pipe is an analogy, and yeah, it's just an analogy to explain because it's very difficult to explain,
Right.
and not the creation of it. Everyone has it. Every living being can do this.
The activation of
But
it.
it's a clearing. It's like imagine a pipe that's clogged, and it's a clearing of it, basically. Yeah, and spiritual development helps with that. You know, personal development helps with that.
Thank you.
Cool.
So, and you might be able to help me with this too. Teaching Reiki, I have some colleagues that are massage therapists, and one of them is very close to the massage board, and has been told, she used to let me know years ago, that the massage board is very particular in Oregon about hands-on. And so what we've incorporated in our classes is that, as I understand it now, and maybe you know differently, I haven't researched it in the last year, that if you're to do Reiki and you want to set up a practice and advertise and choose to charge money, but at least even advertise, and you do not have a massage license, it has to be above the body. If you're a reverend, there's no jurisdiction at this point that you cannot do hands-on healing. So that is something that we stress in our classes. At
Did you
least
say as a reverend you cannot do hands?
lay your hands.
Okay.
The minute you start doing any of this, it becomes manipulation. Now, I have my own thoughts about that, but as a teacher or a person that's letting people go on with their work, I have to let them know that that is some of the legalities in Oregon, which is maybe why some people feel more comfortable with above the body.
Yeah,
Because
quite
they don't want to
possibly.
get into the legalities.
It's such a shame.
So I have my own feelings about that, but
Yeah.
I have to be in integrity with what information
Yeah.
I've received. Have you heard anything different? Because you teach Reiki in Oregon.
I haven't heard anything different from that. I think a lot of the people that I teach are people who want to use it for themselves and their families and their friends. And that was the way it was originally used. I love seeing people use it that way, you know, really do. Yeah.
Several years ago, I had somebody refuse Reiki, not because it was me, it's just in general. She felt that Reiki energy was too intense for her, and it was sort of like electrical currents going through the body. And I still can't understand that.
You know, some people's bodies do react. Everyone's body reacts in a different way. And I've heard people before say they've felt like electrical currents going through the body. Many people, when you give them Reiki, my experience of giving them Reiki, and especially if you're doing it in a group, which is often what they do in Japan, they'll do group treatments, their body can twitch uncontrollably. Like I've seen people jumping off the couch, you know, their body's like, it's simply the body adjusting itself. Reiki is about helping the body to return to its natural state, and so it's helping the body adjust itself. There's kind of nothing weird going on. And again, I would see Chiyoko Sensei and Tadao Sensei encourage people, it's okay, this is your body adjusting itself, let it happen. And the more Reiki they receive, obviously, the less it happens as the body's adjusting. Okay.
You talked about the pipe being clogged, and I'm wondering if, and everybody has this, but I'm wondering if at some point ancient times, the pipe was not clogged.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, do
Yeah,
you know
absolutely.
what the thought is about that?
Yeah, the thought is yes. Yeah, I think it is. And yeah, and over time and with our practices and all sorts of worries and stuff going on, you know, we now, most people's pipe is clogged when they start.
So maybe when we come into the world as newborns, it's open?
You know what? No one knows.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know. I think that children, I think that we accumulate as we grow up. Whether we start with none or whether we start with some, I think we accumulate as we grow up a lot. And children generally are very, very open to Reiki. And a lot, like I have friends who do it and their children join in and say, yeah, I can do that anyway, and off they go. Like, you know. But I can't answer that question, and honestly, I don't know. Yeah. Okay, so if everyone's happy with that, we'll finish there. Please, if anybody would like to learn more or would like to send me questions, I have a website. I don't know how many people got those pieces of paper because unfortunately I didn't have enough. But if you would like to take down my website name, feel free. It's www.learn, Learn, Jikiden, JIKIDEN, Reiki, REIKI.com. So you can connect with me on that if you wanted to ask a question about anything or interested in seminars, whatever.
Are you doing one in this area?
Yeah, I was going to come down. If anybody wanted to learn, I will come down. I'll come down on the July the 11th, actually, in a couple of weekends. 11th, 12th, and 13th, I believe. I said that I would come down.
And what are you going to charge for that? And will that be for a weekend or one day? Or
Yeah, well, the price is set by the Japan office, basically, for each country. And here, at the moment, it's set at $350 for the first level, which is called Shoden, and that's 2 days. And the second level, which is called Okuden, in the second level you learn the psychological healing and the distant healing. That one is $400. And that I will do as a third day if anybody wants it. So I advertise the seminar as 3 days. You can choose to take 2 days or 3 days. It's your choice.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you have a location for that?
I haven't confirmed it yet. But if anybody's interested and they contact me or come to see me afterwards, then I will let you know as soon as I've confirmed the location. It'll be somewhere in town here. Yeah.
This isn't a question, but I'd just like to share this. Some of the people here may not be very familiar with the 12-step programs. I happen to be 21 years of age. And of your 5 steps, or whatever you use the term, some of those are identical in 12-step programs.
Wow, isn't that interesting?
Identical. I mean, gratitude. I mean, that's a normal thing that everybody's taught. Make a gratitude list. Get you out of your funk. And service. You're encouraged and required to have service positions within an organization.
Mm-hmm.
And just for today, our way of saying it is 1 day at a time.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
It's amazing.
It's great, isn't it?
Identical.
Well, I think the thing is true wisdom comes through all over the world in different ways, but there's always a common element to it, really, and it's usually very simple in my experience or my opinion. So thank you so much for coming. It was great.
Well, thank you.
And,
RVML Resource Center is a volunteer-operated federal 501c3 tax-exempt nonprofit organization. RVML is dedicated to providing easy access to a comprehensive collection of information on a variety of metaphysical, spiritual, and personal development subjects. RVML accepts and appreciates all donations. Material and monetary contributions are fully tax deductible. This recording is not copyrighted and permission is granted to broadcast, exhibit, or duplicate all or part of this program for non-commercial educational purposes. This live presentation was organized and presented by the Rogue Valley Metaphysical Library and Event Center. For more information, please visit rvml.org.